Great. So, one of the things at TiE Bangalore we found was, there's a lot of competition for TiE now. Let me say, it's one of the more, hyper environments. There are lots of organizations, and there's just a lot of events. There's lots of workshops. There's lots of corporates who are already engaged. So we were trying to find ways in which work we did at TiE had a slightly differentiated approach, right, to what was already available. Or let's not reinvent the wheel. One of the benefits of being TiE and having both credibility, brand, and long-standing, kind of tenure in the community is that the government is willing to work with you, as opposed to some of the more new age organizations. And so the government was very keen. As at all levels in India now, there's great interest in funding startups and helping startups. And interest doesn't always translate to execution. Let me separate the two. And so intent is there. And so we said, where there's intent, let's try and find a way to exploit that for the benefit of founders, right? And so in Karnataka, we had a very progressive IT minister, Mr. Priyank Kharge, who was looking to really try and push the entrepreneurship process forward in Karnataka. And one of the, there are basically, for me, there are four C's, right? There's co-founders, there's one C that entrepreneurs are looking for. There's basically, they're looking for coaching. This is the mentorship aspect of things. They're looking for, customers, that's the third C. And they're looking for capital, that's the fourth C. I mean, it pretty much comes down to, I boil all our TiE programs down to one of these four C's, right? I say, which of these four C's or pillars are you going to impact? And if you're not, mostly the entrepreneur's not interested, right? And so the capital one is always the hardest because, the bar is quite high when somebody's going to write a check. And so we said, okay, this government program came along. The government is very interested in funding early stage entrepreneurs. So that was the other criteria. When you get to a point where a company is fundable by angels and VCs, again, in an environment like Bangalore, there are a lot of routes. And, while TiE can channel in some sense, we don't necessarily deliver differentiated value. The other thing was, how can we do something at scale? Not just 2, 3, 5 startups, but maybe 100, right? So this was an opportunity that presented itself, and I wanted to kind of show it up to you all, share with you something maybe that's a little different. It's also very tricky working with the government, right? And so I'm glad to talk anybody who's planning to do anything through, how to kind of navigate that, at least what decisions we made and what construct we had. So, I've thrown together a bunch of slides that, Kunal, who's our ED, helped me put together, and, just to give you a flavor of what it is. So this is the end kind of slide, right? What was the positioning we had? The government said we want to impact 100 plus startups. We want to do it fast. We want industry to help because no government babu can sit down and make a decision on whether to fund this company or not. Once we put this out in the community, there's going to be a lot of interest. We need somebody to go through and analyze the pipeline, shortlist, do all that work, right? So this is kind of the essence of the program. There were 4 or 5 areas we defined, and I'll walk you through those later, in terms of what you had to be. But you had to be a company. You had to be an LLC or a startup that's a private limited company. You should not have really been funded significantly before. Problem is, every startup has got some funding or the other, right? Some uncle has written a check at least, or some friend has written a check. So you can't say you cannot be funded, because that's not a criteria that works quite cleanly. We just said you can't be institutionally funded. You shouldn't have taken, let's say, a kind of rough thing about 250,000 or more, right? So you could still be pretty early stage. And we had a lot of interest in this program when we launched it with the government. We worked very closely with them to define kind of the filters, the process. It was statewide. So we actually went to 3 different cities. Our charter members went to 3 different cities to filter startups. 1,700 applicants came in. And so, we were kind of overwhelmed, honestly, when you get 1,700 of anything and you have to look through every plan. All your best plans go to crash landing, right? In some sense. So we actually ended up having to bring in a lot of charter members to help us with the filtering process. Originally, the plan was the team would do it themselves, the first round of filtering, but even that was just too much for the team to do. So we ended up bringing in a whole bunch of charter members who helped us filter through online the first round of these startups. And basically about 1,200 of them actually were pre-screened after the pre-screening process. So basically the first 400 or 500 we eliminated based on the incomplete applications, all of that. And then we ended up with about 60 charter members helping us select the final 100. And basically 35 crores, which is about $800,000 approximately. 5 million, sorry. Sorry. I'm doing my math wrong here. So it's a reasonably impressive number for startups that are early stage. So each one of them got anywhere from 10,000, it was the smallest grant, $10,000, to all the way to about $100,000, right? And these were grants. That's the other thing I should say. We managed to work with the government to convince them that they don't need to own paper in 100 companies and be shareholders in 100 companies. Even if it was a debt instrument, whatever way you did it, finally they would have a headache on their hands and very little would be achieved. We looked at models where would you get a VC or an angel fund to co-invest alongside the government, so to keep everybody kind of have skin in the game. We rejected that as well because then you couldn't get to 100. We talked to a lot of the angel groups and nobody would, commit to doing 100, right? And we really wanted to make sure we created enough scale across all of these. So a little bit of a unique program in the sense that 100 startups got funded between 10 and 100K USD each. The money has already been dispersed to everybody. That was the other thing. Oftentimes you hear about things that get announced, even a startup is selected, but then you have a huge runaround to get the money. This is where I think, having a very progressive minister in place, he made sure that the money was dispersed, very within 90 days of the decision being made, and with very little paperwork in terms of, no more diligence. We did whatever diligence we needed to do up front, and then we have milestones. In almost all of these, the startups have to come back and present to the working committee, which is made up of all industry folks, where they are, and then they get the second tranche, right? So everything was at least 2 tranches, just to make sure that we don't just have people collecting the money, spending it on all the wrong things, and then, the program can't sustain itself, because, we wanted to make sure that the startups were really using this for building a product. The other thing we said was we put some rules around how the money could be used. So you can't just be paying yourself salaries because that, given all the startups are pretty much starving at the first stage, they would just consume whatever grant we gave them in that and not make any forward progress. So we said it had to be for possibly hiring somebody who's a non-founder, paying a stipend, paying some consulting fees, paying a little early salary, buying equipment that you might need. Wherever you can, please use shared. Wherever you can, lease, rent. But if you have to buy in some cases, we allowed that, and basically tried to put some constraints around that without becoming too nitpicky also, right? There's a balance you need to strike. So I think all of that was achieved. We got the funds out to the entrepreneurs. 100 startups have got funded. There's an election coming up in Karnataka, so I'm not sure where, where we'll end up with the new government. But we hope this is a program that we'll be able to sustain into the new year. And that this serves then, once this was done, actually many other states have looked at it as a template that they would like to drive. And so hopefully other TiE chapters will be able to pick up some parts of what we did and go back to their state governments and propose something similar. What I'd like is, 1, you're not touching the cap table. 2, it's a relatively small grant in terms of anywhere from 10 to 100K. But it's an enabler, a real catalyst for many of these companies. And the third was the kind of constraints around the use cases of use of the funds that you could, where you could use it. And it was broad enough, and 100 companies got funded. So I think we'll see some winners from there. Now, we can't claim all the credit for all the winners, but at least, it's more than 10 companies, right? Otherwise, the law statistics will prove that you may not have a winner. You may not have anything to show for the program. So hopefully 3 or 4 years from now, we'll have 10 or 12 entrepreneurs who will come forward and say, hey, this was really helpful. And so, that was the goal of the program. Part of the program was also to fund women entrepreneurs. So we went out and made sure a certain number of these grants were given to women entrepreneurs. And there again, it's a little tricky. I mean, no one company is purely a woman entrepreneur. There we had to define again kind of the rules reasonably liberally, in the sense that we made sure it wasn't just a woman who's acting as a front, obviously, to the startup, but that it was a key decision-making, operating person, right? Who's on the board, a real co-founder, and driving the kind of the strategic decisions of the company. So that's where this program, I think, being a knowledge partner was very important. I think there were other, we managed to get mentors from across the ecosystem for the program. There were other partners as well that we managed to rope in. One of the things we wanted to do was not make this just a TiE thing, right? We managed to get a lot of other community, organizations, ecosystem partners involved as well. I think that was very important, but, a lot of the early screening went out with our partners and our charter members. Now, 100 of these companies have also become, affiliate members of TiE. So we're now in the process of mentoring them. So that this is the coaching part of it, right? So we said, okay, we've given them the money, let's make sure we get those 10, 12 hits out of the 100 at least, if not 25 hits, right? And by hits, I mean, I'm not expecting somebody, will go IPO or anything. I'm just saying, at least they should get to the next round of funding. Angels should now be willing to put the money in. Maybe some of them will get to a Series A. Because don't forget, these are very early stage. They all had prototypes of some kind, but they were not full-fledged companies, right? In the sense that you might think of as Series A or even VC ready in terms of, for fundability. Just a quick look, so you get a feel for the scale and how many companies actually got the funding. It's all up there. When you have 100, you have 3 columns and 3 slides, right? So of companies who actually got the check, they're all up on the state's website with how much money they got. The great thing about working with the government is everything has to be disclosed to, right? In kind of a very transparent way, all the decision making has to be disclosed to. So we had to be quite meticulous, and this was a little bit problematic in terms of why you picked one startup versus another, because there is a little bit of subjectivity finally among the group. Exactly. So the RTI rules apply. So, we had to be quite diligent, and that was a bit of a pain, because normally in a pitch session, the investors will put their hands up, and those that don't walk away, and those that do, they may or may not complete the round, right? This had to be much more rigorous than that. So, it took a lot of effort from our team, the TiE staff, and but they managed to get through it. So, I hope this is useful in terms of, a program that, delivered real value to 100+ young companies in Bangalore last year. It all happened last year. We hope to repeat it. I think there's, whatever happens in the elections, I bet either government will want to come back and repeat it. The good thing about doing a program at this scale, with this much visibility, is that the next person coming in doesn't want to stop it. If the same government comes in, then they'll want to keep momentum going, because it was a good job. And for us, honestly, it's a great way of seeding 100 companies in our community and working with them as mentors going forward. So they're all affiliate members of TiE now, and hopefully they'll be more active within the TiE community going forward. Thank you.